Hello, I'm very excited to introduce you to two local groups who are working to end the prison industrial complex. They are not simply abolitionist groups, they are also restorative justice groups. Prison abolition isn't only the elimination of prisons and jails. Abolition requires chipping away at the current structures while also building and transitioning to new forms of justice and rehabilitation. On this journey, first we'll head up to San Francisco, and then we'll visit a group right next door to us in San Jose. First, a few notes about the region we live in. Silicon Valley and San Francisco are some of the wealthiest areas in the entire country. Home to Silicon Valley, military and defense contractors, and various other types of big business and industry. The region we live in has some of the highest per capita income in the nation. However, income is not evenly distributed across races, genders, or other demographics. Of the households that face a high risk of eviction, 50% are Black and 42% are Latino. Black people are only 2.5% of the total population here, yet 17% of the unhoused population. Latinos are 26% of the total population, yet 44% of the unhoused population. Meanwhile, the price of living here is astronomical. A salary of $250,000 a year is required to buy a median-priced home in the San Jose metro area. This has all created some of the worst income inequality anywhere. 18% of families here have no savings and/or are living in debt. There are currently 12,000 people who are houseless here on any given night, and nearly 200 people die on the streets here each year. This inequality grows worse year by year as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, with an unfathomable amount of people living below the poverty line and without homes. Santa Clara County is home to many working-class communities and even contains rural communities like Gilroy. Despite the diversity of people residing here, its neighborhoods remain remarkably segregated. San Francisco also has a surprising degree of racial segregation despite its inclusive reputation. Although African Americans are just 5% of the population, they are intensely clustered into the Hunters Point Bayview neighborhoods and some parts of downtown. This is a consequence of the extremely high cost of housing and rents in San Francisco, but it is also the result of historical patterns of segregation which prevented Black people from moving into other neighborhoods. Whites are disproportionately concentrated in the northern and central parts of San Francisco. There is also a troubling history of racist policing that continues to this day. In Santa Clara County, for every one white adult arrested for a felony, 7 Black adults were arrested and 3 Latino adults were arrested. In San Francisco, for every 1 white adult arrested, 6 Black adults were arrested. In the Bay Area, even though Black people make up only 7% of the population, 27% of those killed by police are Black. Black people here are more likely to be killed by police than in any other metro area in America except Oklahoma City. About 20% of people killed by police were not armed. 40% of those who were unarmed and killed were Black. Overall, a majority of those killed were experiencing some kind of mental health crisis. In 45% of killings, before the deadly encounters, there was no evidence that those killed were committing any kind of violent crime. This does not appear to be any coincidence, as there is also a long history of public racism by the San Francisco Police Department, with horrific statements made about just about every non-white race. This has also been an issue with Santa Clara County Police Department and in their jails. In Santa Clara County jails, some of the largest in the nation, the guards oversee a jail population that is only 22% white. The jail population is about 55% Latino and 14% Black. Now that we've established some background on this area, let's start our journey to meet two of the groups trying to address these horrific issues. First, let's travel up to No New Jail SF. No New Jail SF was originally a project by Critical Resistance and is now a larger coalition. The No New Jail SF project started when one of San Francisco's older jails at 850 Bryant was to be demolished and a brand new jail was to be built. With a mission to end the prison industrial complex, Critical Resistance quickly jumped in. Over several years of tireless advocacy, in 2015 they successfully persuaded the San Francisco Board of Supervisors to reject plans for a new jail. They were able to do this by shining a light on issues such as the existing jails housing a very high pre-trial population, about 75%. They also examined the extreme levels of homelessness and mental illness among the San Francisco incarcerated. The group also pointed to the egregious racial disparities. While African Americans make up only 7% of San Francisco, they constitute over half of the people imprisoned in San Francisco jails. The group also discussed with city leaders the tendency that when cities build jails, they always try to fill them. If San Francisco was to build a new jail, they'd look to imprison more people to fill it, feeding the prison industrial complex. If we don't stop jail expansions, there's no incentive for cities to reduce jail populations. More jails mean greater danger of imprisonment for more of our family members, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. No New Jail SF was given the San Francisco Hero Award for their human rights advocacy in preventing the new jail, especially following a scathing report by the San Francisco grand jury that detailed how San Francisco jails have a very high percentage population with serious mental illness, and 31% of people imprisoned in the jails have been homeless within the past year. Following this work, No New Jail SF then set their sights on other San Francisco-based projects, including stopping gang injunctions, which are court orders that deprive people of their civil liberties based on alleged gang affiliations, closing a juvenile hall detention center, fighting the criminalization of homelessness, ending quality of life policing, which include things like citations for loitering, public drinking, littering, and then also monitoring and fighting initiatives that would expand funding to SFPD and redirecting that funding to mental and public health programs. The group often prepares research, studies, data, and interviews victims of the broken systems to prepare reports which they can take to review with the city leaders who are causing harm. They engaged in truth-telling and open discussion to help leaders understand the direct and systemic impact created by their policy decisions. I had the privilege to work with No New Jail SF last year, and we were laser focused on stopping an expansive rollout of electronic monitoring across San Francisco. Electronic monitoring is simply another form of incarceration, e-carceration, that is disproportionately used by white people on non-white people. These digital prisons are often combined with house arrest and GPS tracking that make electronic monitoring very punitive and a powerful tool for mass surveillance. These electronic monitoring ankle bracelets are simply shackles by another name. And worse, these shackles, managed by for-profit companies, come with tripwires, or can be subject simply to software bugs, which can send people back to jail within moments. Working with No New Jail SF, we gathered research and studies on electronic monitoring to prepare reports for sister groups and to lobby city leaders. We also interviewed San Francisco and Oakland residents who are or have been subject to electronic monitoring, and in doing so, identified even more issues we could act upon. No New Jail SF aims to chip away at the entire system of jailing and criminalization in San Francisco. Their vision for a solution is community accountability, restorative and transformative justice practices, which fully support both the person who has done the harm and the person harmed, to be supported by the community in getting their needs met and discussing and deciding upon boundaries and agreements for the harm not to happen again. The group wants to shrink and starve the prison industrial complex. In San Francisco, primarily the use of imprisonment and jailing and detention, but also all forms of policing, criminalization, and surveillance in order to dismantle these systems over time. No New Jail SF wants to reduce the scale and impact of imprisonment, policing, and surveillance in every way possible in order to reinvest, free up, and reallocate the city's focus, commitment, and resources to life-affirming community infrastructure, accountability systems, and collective care. Life-affirming alternatives include expanding community-based treatment options for individuals with substance abuse and mental health issues, reducing the number of people who go to jail because of parole and probation violations, expanding pretrial diversion programs, and expanding re-entry services for former prisoners. No New Jail SF aims to transform and change power dynamics and conditions of society in order to shift power towards the people and our communities, and build the solutions that uplift and strengthen the many ways that self-determination, community accountability, and quality, vibrant living conditions are what truly make us safe and enable our city to thrive. It's incredible work, and I'm very grateful to have been able to volunteer with them. Similar work is going on next door with Silicon Valley Debug. Let's head back down closer to the university. A man named Raj Jayadev worked on an assembly line at the Silicon Valley Hewlett-Packard plant in the 1990s and began writing about what it was like working as an entry-level employee in high cost-of-living Silicon Valley and as a worker trying to support their family on $8 an hour with no health insurance, no job security, and no path for advancement. His writings resonated with many Silicon Valley young people, low-wage workers, undocumented immigrants, formerly incarcerated, and victims of white supremacy. In 2001, Raj and his friends then founded Silicon Valley Debug, a local magazine meant to give forgotten workers a voice. The group was named Debug after the common term in the computer industry for when teams would tear apart a product to find the cause of a malfunction. Raj described the group as saying, "It became a symbol for people who felt left out of the Silicon Valley image, and we built a community out of that diversity." Debug has grown into a hub for community organizing and criminal justice reform, as well as a multi-platform media organization. Raj explained that the wide breadth of work his group does is because they don't focus on a specific area of work, they focus on the people and what the people need. He said, "The point is, the journey to liberation need not be a solitary one." One of Debug's biggest projects, for which Raj was awarded a MacArthur Genius Grant, is their work on participatory defense. Silicon Valley is a place in desperate need of help around criminal justice reform, with one of the largest local jails in the nation, and a very long history of human rights violations, hate crimes, and overrepresentation of victims of white supremacy and those suffering from mental illness. Silicon Valley police departments and DA's offices also have a history of corruption, racism, and ableism. Meanwhile, public defenders are often overworked and under-resourced. Without proper legal support, the prosecuted are exponentially more likely to take plea deals, even when innocent. Raj and friends stepped in to create space for a community organizing model for people facing charges, with their families and communities, to impact the outcomes of cases. This model empowers people to tell their stories and show their whole self to a court and judge. It empowers people to work together to strategize on cases based on their previous experiences and community knowledge. The community can then help support the public defenders to more effectively defend the accused, despite the public defender's lack of time and resources. Meetings are now facilitated by people who first came in for their own cases. After bringing loved ones home from wrongful arrests, overzealous prosecutions, or harsh sentences, they became strong advocates. Participatory defense encourages existing community organizing intelligence and strength to penetrate local court systems and transform it. Instead of talking about time served, the time incarcerated in a way, Raj talks about time saved, bringing a loved one home early. He says when they tally the total number of time saved from all their cases collectively over 6 years by looking at the original maximum sentencing exposure someone was facing versus what the individual received after family and community intervention, there are over 1,600 years of time saved. Raj sees this process as part of abolition, chipping away at the prison industrial complex and police violence. He says marching in the streets to oppose police violence and standing with the community in the courtroom to challenge mass incarceration go hand in hand. Through participatory defense, impacted communities can feel a more profound, sustained reshaping of the criminal justice system. They have seen acquittals, charges dismissed and reduced, prison terms changed to rehabilitation programs, even life sentences taken off the table. He's pointed out 8 out of 10 of roughly 2.5 million incarcerated would have been represented by a public defender. Raj says this means, in short, improving public defense is arguably the least talked about, yet highly statistically significant way to challenge mass incarceration as we know it. All of this is truly incredible and transformative work right next door to us. I hope you're interested in learning more about both groups, and if so, I sent an email last week with links for additional reading. I look forward to any questions or comments in class this week. Thank you.